In kindergarten, my teacher asked me, actually asked the whole class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a scientist. And she looked at me and she said, don't you mean a nurse? Now, clearly there's no issue with being a nurse, but the issue back then is that's the only thing she could see a little girl growing up to do that had something to do with sciences. So she was trying to help guide me and counsel me as to what was possible. But I really just put my hands on my hips and I said, no, I mean a scientist. Because I was excited about the world around me. I was always aware of space exploration. I followed the Gemini, the Mercury, and the Apollo programs. I had books about them, and I always assumed I would go into space. I just assumed I would go into space. Not necessarily as an astronaut. I thought because we were on the moon when I was 11 or 12 years old, that we would be going to Mars. I'd be going to work at Mars as a scientist. So I always assumed I would go there.
In 1956, the Olympics was in Cortina, Italy, in the mountains, and we skated outdoors. It's sort of a hyper-sensation, hyper-perception. You're able to think of many, many, many things at once. I was aware of so many things, of the people in the audience, about where I was standing, where the sun was crossing the ice, where I'd take off in the dark and land in the sun, what the mountains looked like, what the moment was. And so when you're there in this magical world of the operating room, with the patient and with the team, and you're dealing with something, you never know totally what you're going to find until you're there. And it's sort of like that multidimensional thinking that I was aware of on the ice, where everything comes into your head at once. You have to be focused, but you also have to be conscious of all sorts of things for the benefit of having the surgery turn out the way you want it to.
For many people with tattoos, it's actually life-threatening to them to walk the streets. If they happen to have the wrong tattoo in the wrong neighborhood, then that means they might get shot and they may not make it to the next day. In addition, it's very difficult for them to secure employment when they have tattoos. There's lots of value judgments about having tattoos, lots of concern for safety and what their affiliations might be with either gangs or drugs. And so many people cannot get employed if they have tattoos. I have a lot of respect for the patients in the tattoo clinic. These are patients who are really trying to change their lives, and change is hard. And yet, they've been courageous enough to actually try to put their life on a different track. So I figure anything that I can do to be helpful to them, I'm very willing to do.
If you had asked me when I was graduating from GW in 1970 if I would be here doing this, I would have said no. And if you had asked me in 1996 when I got elected if I would be in a position to influence national health issues or international health issues, I would have told you, oh no, that was impossible. But today it is, and it's really an honor and a privilege and a responsibility to be able to do that.
Having the opportunity to come be the first permanent director of the Office of Research on Women's Health at the National Institutes of Health represented not only a career change for me, but also a very, very exciting opportunity that I have tried to make the best of in every way that I could. We didn't really have a good focus on what is now called women's health up until about the time this office was established. This office at NIH is really the first office established within the federal government to focus on women's health issues. It was established to make sure that women are included in clinical studies funded by the NIH, in other words, included in research, and to make sure that research is addressing the health of women in studies.
It's really hard to say, okay, I've made a discovery and I know I've helped thousands of people or millions of people. It's when you see the one patient that really has benefited from that discovery that you really know that you've helped. When the family member can come up to you and say, thank you. You helped save my mother. That really makes a difference. And I think that's what motivated me from the beginning when I started seeing patients. on a one-on-one basis when you know that you've saved a life. And then if you make a discovery in the lab, in a rat, that you know can be applied to saving many lives, that really is, that's tremendously rewarding.
No matter where I have been at any stage of my life, I've always been a doctor first and everything else second, except maybe being a mom. But I've never seen myself as a doctor correspondent who just happens to do surgery. I've always defined myself as a practicing surgeon who happens to also have a second career in broadcast journalism. I started combining my love of television with my love of medicine, and the two weave themselves together quite well. The passion in broadcasting is different. The best stuff I've done has been in the worst places on earth. Kosovo, Mogadishu, Bosnia, the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, Pakistan. I think when you get a chance to look around you and see the world suffering and you reach down deep inside yourself and try to explain that to people who may never have the good fortune to travel the same way, that's where I get my passion.
My next door neighbor was professor of pediatrics at the Women's Medical College in Pennsylvania, Dr. Emily Bacon, and she kindly reached out to me in many ways, and I saw her life as more exciting and meaningful than most of the women I knew, who were my mother's friends, for example, who were busy doing good works, raising children, and I admired them greatly, but I still thought Emily Bacon had something going for her in terms of reaching out to all children. But mainly she reached out to me, and I'm eternally grateful. So I applied to Johns Hopkins and Harvard. Harvard didn't take women at that time, but I didn't know it. And Johns Hopkins did. In fact, they had to. They were founded by a woman who insisted that they wouldn't get the money to build the school if they didn't take women on an equal basis with men. And I thought, hey, that neutralizes the problem in one dimension. And Emily Bacon graduated from Johns Hopkins, so there was no question where I was going to go to medical school.
Doing whatever I can to make a difference in one life or one part of one life. And that motivates me to want to do that more. And anything I can do to make a bigger change, whether it's helping to change attitudes or ways of doing things, or just to encourage all of us to have sort of a sense of openness. That's really what I'd like to do.
While I was in medical school, I had the opportunity to go to Cuba. I went to Thailand and worked in a refugee camp. I also went to East Africa, into Kenya, and worked with the Flying Doctors. And I found that when I was in developing countries, I had to rely on myself, my own diagnostic skills. Also, you learned a lot about yourself in that environment. And while, again, I was in medical school, I did all these different things, and I decided that I wanted to spend more time in that kind of environment. And that's sort of how I ended up going to West Africa and working for 2.5 years as an area Peace Corps medical officer for Sierra Leone and Liberia, because I really wanted to, again, put myself in a situation, an environment where I learned about me.
For so many thousands of years, the popular culture believed that stress could make you sick, that believing could make you well. And people believe what they feel. But scientists need evidence. And there really wasn't any good, solid scientific evidence to prove these connections, nor was there a good way to measure them. And scientists only believe what they can actually measure. Once scientists and physicians believed that there was a connection between the brain and the immune system. You could then take it to the next step, that maybe there is a connection between emotions and disease, between negative emotions and disease and positive emotions and health. And we can then say, okay, maybe these alternative approaches that have been used for thousands of years, approaches like meditation, prayer, music, sleep, dreams, all of these approaches that we really know in our heart of hearts really work to maintain health. Maybe there is a scientific basis for it.
I always wanted to be a physician, and I always thought that was what I wanted to do. But my sophomore year in college, my mother developed a bad pain in her back, and the doctors thought it was arthritis. And I can remember going with her to the doctor and having him say, "Francina, if you just wore those Oxfords I gave you and stood up straight and did those exercises, you wouldn't have that pain." But it turned out what he had missed was that she had a bone tumor. I interrupted my career and stayed home with my mother and took care of her 24 hours a day until she died, which was in February of 1961. Then went back to school with even more resolve that I wanted to be a physician, and I wanted to be the kind of physician who paid attention to my patients and didn't dismiss my patients' complaints, something that has really carried through and I think been central to my way of thinking and approaching women's health in this portion of my career.
Starting coalitions is a lot of work. You end up doing all of it yourself. So I thought, well, let me see, maybe I could join an organization that already exists that I could work through and do some of the same kinds of things. And so I ended up joining the Democratic Party, and that I was the first female delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, the first female delegate from any of the territories, as a matter of fact, and then the first female physician ever to serve in the Congress. I think it's really important for young people of color to see people of their own racial or ethnic background in positions like mine, not only on the political front, but also as a healthcare provider, so that they will know that, yes, it's possible for them. Because sometimes in their day-to-day environment, it may not seem that way. So I think it's really encouraging for them to see us and to interact with us.
I received the National Medal of Science in 1991. It is America's highest award for all of science. And so there had been very few pediatricians, if any, that had ever been given the medal. They give it maybe 10 or 15 a year. It's presented by the President of the United States to the nominee. This has been very, very rewarding. And I feel that I am a citizen of this one world, and that I can resonate with people with a lot in common. It's called science and science methods. And I am so saturated and pleased to share it with anybody who will listen. And that makes for a very fulfilling life.
Well, I think fundamentally being a physician is really an honor. It's really a privilege to kind of, walk that path with another human being. People come in because they're suffering and they're in need of help, and I have the privilege of being there to try to assist them. And I really do see it like a partnership. It's not really a one-way street. I certainly have my bag of tricks and all of the years of study under my belt, but it really takes kind of the two of us working together to really come up with something that's going to help them.
And if you look at the people entering medicine today, they're as bright as people have ever been. The youngsters entering medicine today will enter on their own terms. They'll make medicine what they want it to be. But I want young people, particularly young girls, to discover the thrill of science and biology and physics and how it all works. And for my two girls, every time we can draw science or biology into life, we do it. Medicine's filled with a lot of kicks. The other great thing is it's this blank canvas. You want to go into medicine, you get to do anything you want to do. Become a neuropsychiatrist, become a physicist, become a neurosurgeon, be in the lab, see patients, work part-time, full-time, have kids, don't have kids. You get to do it on your own terms. It's great, and you can always put food on the table.